Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. I'm Chris here with Tony, and our guest today is Dr. Derek Alessi. Dr. Derek has a master's degree in nutrition and a PhD in health and physical education. He is the founder and CEO of several businesses, including a health and fitness practice in upstate New York and strengthgenesis.com, where he sells nutritional supplements. And he's the author of several books, including the Bermuda Triangle Diet, and has made a lot of TV, print, and radio appearances. So we are very excited to speak with him today. Dr. Derek, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Chris, great for being here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Dr. Derek, in your books, you talk about the three pillars approach. But before we get to that, let's start at the beginning. If I walk in as a new client to your business, which is in East Amherst, right? That's just outside of Buffalo. So if I walk in, let's talk about your approach to wellness overall. Where do we start with a new client?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This field, this health, this fitness, this nutrition field, whatever you want to call it, loves a lot of one-off approaches. A lot of people are led to believe they need a diet, they need a health club, they need a Fitbit, they need a Peloton, they need some type of gadget, but it never really gives people the whole program or what they really want to have for consistent results or long-term results. So the way in which I see this entire industry is a lot like education. See, if you go to a teacher and you want your grades to improve, the teacher first has to assess what your grades are. And then from there, they will prescribe the right classwork, the right homework, and the right evaluations to improve your grade point average. And if you do that, wanting to be a better student, your grade point average improves. And I take the same approach with health and fitness, weight loss, wellness, whatever you want to call it. So when a client first, to answer your question, when a client first comes in to see me, I first will start with an evaluation and consultation, and it's not a short process. It's about an hour, hour and a half in length of time in which I'm going to measure body composition. So I want to see what I'm looking at in terms of pounds of fat, pounds of lean, body fat percentage. I want to do a health history. I want to take a look at medications, if any. I want to take a look at goals. I want to take a look at exactly what they want to achieve. And then from there, like a teacher, I'll see what their grade point average is, and we'll put together the right classwork, which is going to be their physical fitness, their homework, which is going to be their nutrition, huge field, huge topic. And then lastly, we're going to put together ongoing evaluations to improve their grade point average to have them become a better student.
I like the holistic approach, and I like the fact that you bring up body composition because too many people get too focused on BMI and, you know, Dwayne Johnson's BMI places him in an unhealthy category, but I think we both know that that man is a lot healthier than most of us. So there's a lot more to consider than just the weight, and a lot of people just step on the scale and leave it there. So when we talk about it, let's start with nutrition. That's one of the cornerstones here, I think. And can you explain some of the key principles you look at when it comes to nutrition?
I'm just going to take a half step back. The entire story of BMI, it's funny that you bring it up. Do you know how they got to BMI, how it even became a thing?
I don't.
So it's really interesting. Back in 1959, the New York Metropolitan Life Insurance Company put out actuary tables, which had nothing to do except for how tall a person was. So it was height, and then how much they weighed, weight. So it was height and weight. And a lot of people took exception to it because they thought it was a little bit too biased and they hated to be categorized based upon their height and weight. So in 1983, they went to something called BMI, where they did something unique. They took the person's height and they squared it, and they took their weight and they cubed it. And then they divided the two into each other. So it gave you a totally new set of numbers that you couldn't attribute to height and weight. Now, the funny part, though, is it only uses two variables, height and weight. So correct, I couldn't agree with you more. Dwayne Johnson, Arnold, anybody that has any muscle tissue whatsoever is never going to look good on a BMI. So I completely agree. So if you have more muscle, if you're more athletic, and your BMI is higher, it's going to be higher. And that has nothing to do whatsoever with how much fat or how healthy you are.
Mm-hmm. And somebody with more muscle mass is just going to have a healthier metabolism for the simple fact where you're burning your calories. It's not your fat tissue. It's not in your bone mass.
Yeah, absolutely right. Often overlooked. And unfortunately, when you walk into your physician's office, you could try to have that conversation, but honestly, they're not aware of it. They're not receptive to it. And if, for the most part, you're not going to go anywhere with it. But you're absolutely right. It makes all the difference in the world with your metabolism, with your mobility, and really with the quality of your life. So yeah, it's a great thing to look at.
So when we are beginning talking about nutrition, where do you start with your plans, and how do these plans differ for men as compared to women? What are you looking at when you start work with a client?
Yeah, that's a great question. And oftentimes we want to jump right into fitness, but I think you jump right into diet, right into nutrition, because between the two, that's the faster or more sustainable way to change a person's body composition is by what they're eating. I work with people that are a little bit older. They're over 40, they're over 45. In fact, the mean age of a person I work with is 64 years of
Oh,
age.
wow.
So I'm not working with kids per se when it comes to nutrition. In general, I do have some principles that will apply to everybody, although it's never a one size fits all. The
Right.
first thing that we must look at is what do we have to do to lower insulin? Insulin seems to be really the marker or the mothership of hormones, if you will, in terms of if it's elevated, you're going to store more body fat, you're going to have more cellular inflammation, you're going to improve or increase the aging process, advanced glycated end products, and really put more stress and pressure on your health. So we have to look at to make sure the insulin levels aren't too high. And of course, the easiest, quickest way that we could influence those is about looking at the total amount of high glycemic carbohydrates. So that is going to be,
Sugars.
yeah, sugars, high starch, high grains, those types of things are
Yeah.
going to cause a problem as opposed to total carbohydrates. Because if most people are just having asparagus, I'm not as
Right.
worried about it. But of course, they're not necessarily doing it. So I'm going to look at that first. I'm going to look at the carb load. I'm going to look at the glycemic index. I'm going to look at their body fat percent. And if they have it, or if they're willing to get it, I'm going to ask them to get a fasting insulin reading from their
Mhm.
primary care because it's really going to tell us a lot about their metabolism.
Absolutely. And you say in your book, and of course, a lot of people, anybody who's tried to diet knows this. Most diets fail. Why?
I'm going to go back to my school analogy again. I
Sure.
think if you're struggling in school and you meet with a teacher and say, I really have to do great on this midterm or on this final, what do I have to study? How do I have to cram? Because it's really, really important to me. And maybe you can pull it off, maybe you can't, maybe you get a decent grade. Now, that is fine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good student. You crammed to get an exam, and chances are you got a good grade, then you went back to your old ways. And I see the same thing too with nutrition and diet. And unfortunately, Chris, I think for a lot of people, it's the same type of thing. They think, well, if I could lose 20 pounds, if I could lose
Mhm.
50 pounds, and they put some goal of how much weight they want to lose or what goal weight they want to get to. And they put a lot into it. To me, it's like cramming for a test and then going back to your old ways. So what I would say is this is you are, in fact, Chris, if you were a client, I'd say, Chris, you are not Chris that's trying an exercise and fitness program, trying to lose 30 pounds, 40 pounds. And you might at first say, no, I am. I'm Chris trying to lose weight and I am starting this program. I said, true. But instead of trying to do this diet program or fitness program, I want you to think of yourself as Chris, who is already the embodiment of health and fitness. See, we're not cramming for an exam. We're a good student. And good students do the right things all the time. They make all their classes, they do their homework, they complete their assignments, they take good notes. And because of it, they're good students all the time. They're not waffling and yo-yoing with their weight. If we took that approach, once again, I hate to sound like a fourth grade school teacher here, but if we take that scholastic approach, thinking, what do we have to do mindset without lifting even a finger of effort? What do I have to do with my mindset to become a good student? If I do that, then I'm not doing a diet. I'm doing a lifestyle. And if I am a good student, if I am a healthy and fitness person, I'm going to follow those habits. So as much as I could try to persuade somebody, I'm going to say if you could persuade yourself that you are a good student, that you are doing a good nutritional program, it's going to be easier for you and you're going to sustain it without yo-yoing.
So I'd like to ask a quick question too. How do you propose people actually maintain or get into that mindset, I suppose, of doing that? Like, I think a lot of people that listen to our podcast are athletes, but they do it because they like to be athletes. But if that's not my interest, becoming a good student in a subject that I'm not interested in is difficult. So, what's your proposal for that? I guess basically, how do you become a good student? Like, I don't like chemistry. How do I become a good chemistry student since I don't like chemistry?
Well, it's an interesting question, Tony, and there's no doubt about it that people do struggle with it. When a person finally contacts me on a private level, they're usually raising their hand saying, look, my grades aren't good, but they are important to me. So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't otherwise. And in general, I don't see too many first-time people that have never tried anything before. They have joined health clubs, they have done diets, they have bought home fitness equipment, they have the butt busters, and they have all those things. But
Yeah.
they already know that they've exhausted those quick fixes and they're looking for a more sustainable approach. So that's the first question I have to somebody typically is how important is this to you? And many of them, most of them will reply back, it's extremely important to me, otherwise I wouldn't be here. Okay.
Hmm.
So if we take the approach that it's important to them, then we start getting a little bit more into the mindset. But Tony, you make a good point. Let's say that somebody has struggled for a long time, years, decades, their whole life. It's it would be great to just flip a switch. And I think this entire industry tries to do that for New Year's resolutions. And of course,
Yeah.
we all know they start on January 1st and National
Right.
Critters is like January 11th. It doesn't last long.
Right.
Because of that very thing. You can't flip the switch on it. It's something that you have to improve with. So once again, I guess to keep going back to a school analogy, the more you practice with it, the better you get. So to answer the question, it's tough. You have to start somewhere. You have to start with the approach of I am serious about this and I want to get better at the mindset, but I can't expect somebody to jump in from a mindset day one and be the valedictorian. It's
Mm.
going to take some time to work that as well, just like it would be with the weights and on the strength floor. I would love to be power cleaning 315 day one, but I do know that's not going to happen. In fact, I'm probably not going to power clean at all day one, even with lightweight. I'm going to do some other exercises to build a foundation first. I'm going to be doing my planks and I'm going to be doing my core and I'm going to be doing the more traditional things. Mindset's the same way. So we jump in, we start trying to establish good habits, and of course, over time, hopefully they keep getting better and stronger until a person is a good student or really does want to improve their health and fitness.
I like the holistic approach. You talk about the low success rate of dieting, and I do want to touch on one thing that kind of pulls this together a little bit. Obviously, I want to lose weight, go into a calorie deficit. I'm going to lose weight, but that's not always the best approach in terms of impacting my body composition. If I go into a calorie deficit, I might lose weight, but what exactly am I losing, and why is this not the optimal approach?
Yeah, unfortunately for us, Chris, growing up during that time of the 19, I'm going to date myself here, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the lower calorie, counting calories, counting points, type of approach is what was our mindset. We all think it was calories in, calories out. Now, we're saying that kind of tongue in cheek, knowing that darn well that's not really where it's at right now
Right.
because we don't want to lose just weight. Now, a lot of people might be listening saying, no, 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 that's not true. I really do want to lose weight. We get that, but you don't want to lose the muscle. You don't want to lose the
Right.
bone. You don't want to lose lean tissue, connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, blood, muscle. You don't want to lose those things. In fact, you want to increase those.
Right.
So, what you really are looking to do is to lose weight if the weight is only fat weight, which is back to what you just said, and that's body composition. So, yes, it plays a bigger role. And in doing so, we can't do it without looking at our food selection. So the term that you'll start hearing more and more is something called internal starvation. And that is a person that follows a low calorie approach. They're only having 5, 6, 700 calories a day, but they're still having 5, 600 calories a day of foods that aren't good for them. So their
Garbage.
insulin is garbage foods. Their insulin is still elevated. They're not dropping any fat, even though they're not eating anything, but they're robbing their body of what they do need, the proteins and fats. And because of it, they're losing their lean tissue, which is not sustainable and it's not healthy.
They're losing muscle mass. They are catabolizing their muscle mass because their body needs the protein.
Exactly. Exactly. So you might weigh less on the scale, but it's not the kind of weight you want to be losing.
And I do want to touch on something else here while we're talking about it. a lot of people, if they follow the RDA on protein, they may get by, but I personally consume a lot more protein than the recommended daily allowance. How do you guide the people you work with in terms of protein consumption? Do you just follow the minimum RDA, or are you also pushing them to more protein? And
Yeah, so you're right. So the RDA is the minimum value, and I think a lot of people have to understand that that's the minimum value that a human body needs in order to survive. So the RDA is recommending you don't go below 0.8 grams per pounds of body weight or kilograms per body weight. Yes, that's the minimum to survive. Now, there's not many people that come to see me that say, well, I only want to survive.
right.
It's awfully,
Yeah.
awfully low. We want to do better than survive. You want to optimize. You want to feel good. Some people might be athletes. Some people, obviously, we want to live longer. We want to live better. We want to be active. So we're seeing different numbers now. You're now seeing at least 1 gram per, I'm going to get away from kilograms, per pound of body weight as a
That's a
minimum.
lot.
You're
That's a
seeing
lot of protein.
1.2, you're seeing 1.5. Bodybuilders, heck, have been 2 plus in terms of grams. So it does run the gamut. In general, though, you do have to consider the fact that protein, it's a Greek word, and if you break it apart, it means first importance, pro or for the teen, the importance of the organism. So it's first importance. In general, we're looking for higher quality sources of protein. We're not looking for garbage protein. We need the essential amino acids, but most adults don't overdo protein. It's not like you're running out and going to have 19 chicken breasts
Right.
today. And if you did it, in fact, maybe you guys have tried it before, you have 96 ounces of meat in one day, like John Candy, the big old 96 ouncer. You can't
Yeah.
do it 2 days in a row anyway.
No.
It's impossible. So in my practice of doing this for 30 years and in my supplement company, Strength Genesis, I haven't seen it from people on a daily basis too much. So I would start with the protein no matter what.
Good quality sources of protein that you recommend include what? As far as dietary, not supplementation.
Yeah, in terms of dietary, it's all about getting the essential amino acids. So I know I mentioned that just before. For listeners, when it comes to eating protein, protein is made up of 23 amino acids. You do not have to remember that, but there's 9 that are essential that you might see it on, if we talk about a protein container as essential amino acids, or sometimes you've heard them referred to before as complete proteins. And they're complete because they help the muscle tissue rebuild and repair. Now, yes, you can get some amino acids from things like beans and corn and rice and mix them together, but they're incomplete proteins. You'll always get complete proteins from proteins that come from animal sources. So chicken, fish, turkey, beef, pork, eggs, things like that. So that's what I'm really jumping into or starting with. And then I think to your point, Chris, are there different levels of that? Well, of course there are. You could get into the whole wild caught fish versus
Mm-hmm.
farm-raised fish and cage-free eggs, supposed cage-free eggs, all of the differences of bioavailability and so on and so forth. But I think the conversation starts with eating complete proteins.
And for those who don't know, when we talk about the 9 essential amino acids, these are the amino acids that must be consumed. Your body is not able to synthesize them, so they must come from your diet. Otherwise, you will be deficient in these, and those deficiencies will manifest in a number of ways, including low energy and reduced muscle mass. And while we're talking about sources of protein, when I was a kid, the conventional wisdom was always that dietary cholesterol, which is found in a lot of these sources, correlated with your LDL, your low density lipoprotein cholesterol, your blood cholesterol. That thinking has changed, hasn't it?
Dramatically. So we live in a different time. Actually, we grew up during a different time. I shouldn't say, because I feel as though it's coming back out of it again. So when you look at cholesterol, it's super interesting. The whole world started changing in the 1950s. 1951, Dr. Ansel Keys does his 8-nation study, determines that the United States has the highest level of heart disease risk because the highest level of this hormone called cholesterol. So we go on this whole low fat, no fat dietary kick, start taking statin medications, and really, when you look at it, ridiculously successful of lowering cholesterol. So over a 60-year period, cholesterol in the United States dropped over 30%, which is huge. fantastic. So we should all be super healthy. But what we found though is the opposite happened. Cholesterol levels did drop, but heart disease went through the roof, diabetes went through the roof, dementia went through the roof, obesity went through the roof because we are chasing the wrong thing. Now,
Hmm.
most people don't even realize that cholesterol is a hormone, first and foremost. Secondly, when you look back at Ansel Keys's study, in fact, if anybody ever read the book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, they do a much better job than I'm doing of explaining this. Dr. Sinatra in there does a great job of talking about where it came from. The US did not have the highest cholesterol levels in the world. We had one of the lowest, and now we currently do have the lowest of any industrialized nation. All of the nations that live longest have the highest cholesterol levels. So that whole thing has been put to bed. The United States did not play that one properly, or some people would say they played it perfectly from an economic point. It's been ridiculously successful in terms of statin medications and pharmaceutical sales.
Right.
But in
Right.
terms of health outcomes, oh my goodness, it turned out that we were wrong and the rest of the world was right on that one. So yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, they that was that the same study where they recommended the where they came up with the Mediterranean diet as being one of the kind of optimal diets?
Well, the Mediterranean
Or am
diet
I
was
misremembering?
well, that was the Mediterranean diet is interesting. It came about before and then it got popular after.
Hmm.
This was a complete, if you remember growing up, everything had to be low fat or no fat.
Right.
You couldn't
Right.
Yeah.
use butter, you couldn't eat meat. You better not eat shrimp. Deep water fish would kill you. All of these things, you have to have, a big hot steaming plate of noodles, have more oatmeal, eat more cereal, have more crackers, eat more low fat products, use margarine. All of those things kind of were born out of the low fat, no fat craze to control cholesterol. And it does control cholesterol, but to our detriment, it
Right.
controls cholesterol. So looking back at it, our grandparents and great grandparents who would eat the entire animal, including organ meat, would use butter, would use salt, would process their own meat, lived to be in their 90s, 95, some even 100, and most of them smoked.
Right.
Now you look at it and it was all low fat, no fat, more grains, more oatmeals, more cereals, more noodles, no butter, no salt, no oil. And, we're dying on an average age of 76 years of age right now, with a burden of about 6 to 8 medications per person. It was the opposite effect of, I think, of what we intended to have.
While we're still on protein, quickly, what do you say to these pesky vegans like myself about protein?
I didn't realize that. I would have changed the approach a little bit of what we were talking about. Yeah, so when it becomes to a vegan, of course, you can get complete proteins, but you can't get them easily. It just is harder work, and you can't do it without changing your blood sugar or your insulin. So, yes, a lot of people will point to the fact that you could take beans, you could take rice, you could take corn, you could combine them together, and you can make complete proteins, and you can. Once again, though, it does take more steps. And number two is you will have a glycemic index increase and an insulin burden because of it. So, in terms of dropping body fat, it could certainly be more challenging. Also, too, when you start looking at some other things like bioavailable protein levels and iron and other things like that, it's going to be something that you're going to have to address separately. Otherwise, you run some other risks of low iron, some anemia, some digestive issues, and those types of things.
So I looked at your website earlier. If you don't mind talking a little bit about supplementation, which um, might be something good for vegans to look into. Some of the stuff is hard to get from plant-based sources, the complete proteins. I think there are a couple. Maybe quinoa and chia seeds have complete proteins, but far, far easier to get it from meat. But let's talk about supplementation. Now, if I look at your website and I compare it to a GNC, you probably have a fraction of a percent of the products that are available on GNC shelves, or even a CVS. So why are you offering such a limited selection?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, obviously, those places are storehouses. It's like kind of like trying to compete with Walmart or compete with Amazon. They have everything in the world. I took a completely different approach. I was not, I didn't jump into this industry to get into selling supplements. You talked about my background earlier and having a private practice for 30 years. It was all about being a practitioner of health and helping people get fit and in better shape. Supplementation for me happened later just because I was looking for better quality products than I could get at a GNC or a vitamin shop. I wanted something very unique, something higher end, and something that delivered a heck of a lot more to people that it was important to. So that's why I created Strength Genesis. So our products are very unique and they're different. And I basically have two themes going throughout the entire supplementation line. And that is number one, the highest quality I could get. So you may have seen that the protein powder is like New Zealand grass-fed protein. And the reason why New Zealand is because New Zealand has the highest standards of what they call grass-fed. You can't call it grass-fed in New Zealand unless it's grass-fed 100% of the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In other countries, it's totally different. I don't know if you know, in Canada, you could call it if it's 20% of the time, and in the US, if it's
Oh,
just
wow.
4% of the time. So totally different when you get New Zealand. Um, the second theme that I have in supplementation is plastic. So when you go into GNC, when you go into Vitamin Shop, everything is put into plastic containers. Why? Well, they're dirt cheap. They're very inexpensive, very economical. It doesn't cost much. The problem, though, is plastic, and we all know this with microplastics, it's not good for us.
Right.
So, correct, it's not good for the environment. I'm not an environmentalist. I don't know all of the effects of plastic in the environment, but I do know how bad it is for us personally. It makes it challenging, if not even harder, to lose body fat. It increases your risk of many different kinds of cancers. You don't want an abundance of plastic in your environment. So, what we did is something different. We decided to put everything in sustainable packaging. So, all of my oils are in glass and all of my powders are in metal.
Okay.
So if you think about going into GNC and you buy a protein container, you're not buying a protein container in a big metal container. You're buying a big thing of plastic. Where we sell it in these protein metal containers, it's kind of like you're getting, I hate to use this analogy, but paint.
Hmm.
It's that type of aluminum, that type of grade metal, or the same type of thing as you would get a soft drink in some type of aluminum or metal, although with our powders, it's much thicker than a soft drink type of aluminum because we don't want it leaching any of the plastic and any of the petroleum byproducts into your bloodstream, into your muscle tissue, into your cells. I'm a big fan of longevity. I don't want to I don't want to shoot myself in the foot and die prematurely of something that was highly preventable, such as keeping
Mhm.
plastics out of my system. So we wanted a product line that was better for the body, better for the planet. And that's essentially what we did with Strength Genesis.
And if I am going to take these supplements out of metal, how am I going to get my RDA of petroleum food products? I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I guess eat more cereal out of the plastic
It's,
coated
yeah,
box.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
You get plenty of opportunities just in day-to-day life, Chris.
That's yeah, yeah. Some of those food dyes and stuff. I
Uh,
don't know who decided we should derive food dyes from petroleum, but hopefully, well, anyway, moving on. So maybe as someone with a with a master's in nutrition, you can help us navigate. It's an unregulated market. It is very hard to know what you're getting when you're navigating the supplement market. Do you have any other advice when we're trying to evaluate a supplement? Both in terms of efficacy and safety.
I try to put myself in the customer's position. So you mentioned like a GNC vitamin shop. If you were to walk in there as the average customer, it's extremely easy to be overwhelmed and confused. Every label sounds pretty good. Every one
Yeah.
of them sounds better than the next. And the best you can do is go back up to the front counter and ask the kid sitting behind the counter which one you should take. And mind you, you're asking that question probably to a 19-year-old.
Right.
So it's very confusing. And I know every label says, please check with your doctor. Have you guys ever tried doing that?
The doctor doesn't know.
No idea whatsoever. Yeah, if you were to bring in all of these different supplements, or even like if you took three different kinds of protein powder and showed it to your doctor, and no disrespect to any of the physicians, but they wouldn't know what they're looking at. So we did take that approach as well. And yes, there are some standards when it comes to it. Obviously, the more ingredients in a product, typically the worse. yes, you should be able to pronounce and see exactly what's in the
Right.
product. But of course, though, you want to start learning over time. So we talked about a limited selection of what we offered at strengthgenesis.com, and that is true because we didn't want to necessarily pump out 12 different types of protein powders that were all different sources and different kinds. We wanted to
Hmm.
keep it pretty consistent across the board, and it was New Zealand grass-fed protein with very few ingredients in it. The same with fish oil. So we have this fish oil called omega-3, and it mimics prescription fish oil. Now,
Okay.
when it comes to fish oil, some people may not know this because you say again, well, geez, why would somebody ever get prescription fish oil? It doesn't make any sense. I can go into GNC, I can go into Sam's Club or Walmart, and I can buy fish oil. Who would ever get prescription fish oil, and who would ever spend $1,200 a month on fish oil? So fish oil happens to be not about the strength per se, but about the processing of the fish oil. So fish oil is extremely unique. So all of the initial studies on fish oil talking about how it was the best thing ever, it
Hmm.
lowers triglycerides, lowers blood pressure, lowers blood sugar, helps the cell become healthier, reduces inflammation, was all done on prescription fish oil. In fact, the first one was something called Lovaza. Lovaza is made by a pharmaceutical company called GlaxoSmithKline, and they were the first to market with prescription fish oil. Now, you can't put a patent on fish. I can't say, well,
Right.
this type of fish I'm going to put a patent on. You can't do that. But you can put it on the processing. So what they did is they put a patent on cold processing of fish oil, which meant they processed the fish oil at extreme cold temperatures. So when people asked why did they do that, and that's because the reason why you took fish oil in the first place was because of the potency of the omega-3 fats, and that's the good fats that help the cells rebuild and repair. Now, fish oil has a smoke point at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which means those good omega-3 fats go bad above 90 degrees. Okay, so
Barely above room temperature.
barely above room temperature. So most people say, well, okay, so I can't cook with it. Fine.
Yeah.
Keep it in a cool, dark place. Fine. That's true. But if you took one half step back and you looked at the processing of it, the best way to do it is to do it at extreme cold temperatures. But
Hmm.
that's not what most supplement companies do. They heat up the fish to extract the oil. So a person is reading about it and they're saying, wait a second, Dr. Derek, I've been reading a lot about fish oil saying it's not good for you. In fact, it can increase your risk of cancer. It doesn't help your cells. It doesn't reduce inflammation. True, because the testing they're doing is with over-the-counter, non-cold pressed fish oil. It's cheaper and faster to get it into your system, but it's not as good. So
Not a
that whole patent thing it expired about 9 years ago. So now you can get cold processed fish oil that does have higher qualities of DHA fatty acids as opposed to EPA. By the way, they're both good for you. So if you see fish
Okay.
oil and it says EPA and DHA, they're both beneficial. However, the real super horse or superpower is with the DHA. Not that EPA is not good, they are both good, but DHA should be in higher quantity if possible and cold processed. And if you do that, you got a great fish oil. So we mimicked exactly what they do with prescription fish oil, but as opposed to $1,200 per month, we sell it for about 60 bucks. So completely different price point, but you could understand why the pharmaceutical industry did it.
Right. Sure. And I also want to ask about your pre-workout. Let's just start with the basics. What's in it?
Yeah, so pre-workout. The first thing that you're going to put in a pre-workout drink, of course, is some type of stimulant. The
Caffeine.
reason why people, so when you look at pre-workout drink, it's a really interesting process. Even Arnold in the late 1960s, early 1970s would drink coffee before his workout. He wanted the stimulating effect of the caffeine prior to the workout. And I know even modern day, a lot of people want caffeine or they'll take caffeine pills. Some will take nicotine or nicotine pills, nicotine pouches, nicotine patches. But a lot of the pre-workout drinks, of course, have different kinds of caffeine and so on and so forth. So that's the benefit. It's the stimulant. You want to stimulate your nervous system before the workout. Now, of course, though, you could combine more than just the stimulant into a pre-workout. You could put some amino acids in there. You could put some
Hmm.
branched chain amino acids in there to help rebuild and repair the muscle tissue. We put in something called creatine monohydrate into it or creatine into it, which not only helps the muscle tissue rebuild and repair, but it also holds water so you have more endurance during the workout. which is great for your energy levels and your ATP cycles. But lastly, I guess for me, the real kicker to answer the question, Chris, is something called beta-aniline. So beta-aniline is an amino acid, and it's a beneficial amino acid, but not everybody reacts to it well, self included. Now, how do you know if you've ever had trouble with beta-aniline? It's simple. You take a pre-workout drink, and if you get really itchy, really red, if you start to feel like your skin's coming off, if you feel like you've been sunburned, those are all different side effects of beta-aniline. I don't handle it well. I've had a number of clients that didn't handle it well. So I wanted to remove it from the pre-workout drink so that people didn't have that itchy, high-V, rashy feeling to it, but still deliver the stimulant, still deliver the creatine monohydrate, and keep it sugar-free too.
And when we're talking about creatine, I want to make sure that people know how creatine works. That does increase the available energy, the ATP, in your cells, and it's not just muscle cells; it's brain cells. It increases neurological function as well. So I think it's a very important supplement that more people should probably look into. And I'm specifically curious, though, you mentioned the branched chain amino acids. That is valine, leucine, and isoleucine, correct?
Correct.
What do these do?
So a lot of research has been put into the fact that those are the backbone or the building blocks of the essential amino acids that you would need. We talked about the 9 essential amino acids before, and those would be the top 3 of building everything out of or building muscle tissue upon. So the premise was if you could increase those 3 branched chain amino acids, you would have more success of rebuilding and repairing your muscle tissue after the workout. So most research points to the fact that those would be the powerhouses that you would start with, especially if you're in a regular strength training routine or if you're an athlete.
And let me ask you this. While we're talking about, Tony is a vegan. I'm not. I'm an omnivore. I try to limit my intake of animal products, but I do eat a lot of fish, specifically fish and eggs. When we're talking about branched chain amino acids, do you think these would be of particular benefit to a vegan or a vegetarian?
Oh, highly. Yeah, because it's going to be harder to get those in from non-animal sources. So, of course, by taking those in, by taking in amino acids in general, you're going to find it easier to repair your muscle tissue. And when we say muscle tissue, I think it's important to note a couple things. We all think of skeletal muscle. We think of our strength. We think of joint integrity. We talk about movement patterns or athletic patterns, and that's true. But we also can't forget cardiac pulmonary muscle tissue and or smooth muscle tissue, which is digestive muscle tissue. One of the things that a vegan can run into is different types of digestive issues. And part of it is because of the muscle tissue that's involved with breaking down food. So when we consume nutrition, we all think about the chemical breakdown of food, which is true. We have the hydrochloric acid that helps break the food down. But the muscle tissue also moves it along the pathway. And if that smooth muscle isn't getting rebuilt and repaired, we're going to have absorption issues. We're going to have digestive issues, which many vegans unfortunately can run into. So it is something to take note of and to take a look at, and it will help not just in your power output and in your muscle tissue, but in your digestion and cardiac output as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I always like to make sure we mention that a large percentage of our listeners do consume plant-based diets, and to function at a high level athletically, I think it's important. Plant-based people need to be more aware of what they're taking in, and most of them are, but extra tips never hurt. This conversation ran longer than usual, so this concludes part 1 of our 2-part conversation with Dr. Derek Alessi. Thank you for listening. Please make sure to like or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We also list the show notes and have lots of bonus content available on Substack or Instagram.